Hey, welcome to the J and K Show. So today we are proud to have one of our guests. She is the preeminent authority on one of the essential life skills. That life skill is conflict resolution, or as she puts it, re-imaging conflict in culture and community. Folks, welcome. Please welcome Dr. Nashay Lowe.
Hey.
Welcome, Dr. Lowe. Listen, thanks for joining us, man. I had been so I'm not supposed to care who they book or anything, but I have to confess, I was really looking forward to having this conversation with you because I feel like it's one of those things where I think we all kind of experience it. And then just because I'm just an information junkie and I want to understand how folks think. So
Mhm.
before we get into it, can you take a moment or two just for those who may have been living under a rock, tell us who Dr. Lowe is and what it is you do.
Who is Dr. Lowe? Well, my name is Dr. Nashay Lowe. I'm originally from California in the Bay Area, adopted by Atlanta, Georgia, and now I am in Nashville, Tennessee. My background is I started off in journalism and moved on to international relations, and then later on got my doctorate in international conflict management.
Oh, wow. That
So
is
I've always a little journey, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But along the way, like the thread between all of those things was whether I was writing about it, researching it. I've always been fascinated by just the way human beings connect and relate with one
Mm,
another
okay.
across context. So, we know how difficult it can be to manage a relationship when it's one to one versus in your family versus your friend group, at work with your colleagues. And then I looked at it from a global scale of how we connect across communities and countries and nations and
Sure.
states. And I found a lot of overlap, which I now basically take what I've learned after traveling to over 30 countries. I now take those global frameworks and apply it at a micro level where I just try to help people communicate a little better every day.
Wow. No, that's dope. And so I'm going to apologize in advance for bringing down the overall IQ because wow, that's a lot. My journey is far more linear,
Oh
so
my
I'm
gosh,
I'm
stop
I'm, I'm
it.
loving this. So, um, how about this? What is conflict resolution?
Okay. That's okay. Let me start off with one of the biggest myths about it.
Oh,
Um so one of the biggest myths about conflict is that resolution means agreement. Um, Resolution to me means clarity. So it means understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface. So that's the unspoken needs, fears, values, expectations, aka human needs. So that conflict stops running the conversation in the background.
right,
So this is why communication is at the center of it all, because whether we like it or not, that's just a natural part of our everyday lives. We have to communicate for a living. And so healthy communication is less about winning a point and more about making meaning of the situation together. So
got it.
I'll say that for
Yeah.
resolution.
So 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 here's the part that just made me think. So I've got friends or people that I know that are introverts, and so okay.
Me
So they
too.
so how much of that? So when I hear conflict resolution, I often look at this as a way of maybe a personality trait, as opposed to. It sounds like you're saying that this is maybe a learned behavior.
That's a part of it. We definitely, like to me, I've observed that conflict is very much patterned. It's a lot of us reenacting things we've been through in our lives over and over again, just in different circumstances. But you're absolutely right. It also has a lot to do with, I also talk about conflict personalities and communication styles because people tend to be one of two things, more avoidant when it comes to conflict and
Hmm,
more, we'll say, assertive or confrontational. And that's not meant to sound like a negative, but it's just kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. So yes, it does play a big part, but I think what we can do is learn as much as possible about how each of these behaviors act. So that way we know how to approach people when we're dealing with the opposite or even ourselves. It's kind of hard to look in the mirror too. And when you're a lot of times when you're fighting with especially a family member, it's because they're a lot more like you than not like
hmm.
you.
Good point. Good
So
point.
it's really about learning your own personality style, the weaknesses and the strengths of those, as well as others, and that way we can use those to communicate a little more effectively.
Right. Um, I'm going to get into maybe what those practices are, right? So if you are this person and maybe you're driven by something to where you need to kind of change your approach to it and your attitude
Mm,
towards it. Maybe you've got promoted to a job and you're in a particular position. Maybe you are now, you've got children now or multiple children and you have you're finding yourself on the opposite side, especially in this climate where there's so much kind of tribalism now, right? There's red and there's blue, and it's like if
mm,
so we're not talking as much. But before I get into that, one of the things I was looking at, I was watching your content, which is something I do often, and you brought up, and keep me honest, you brought up the idea of having communication, I think the word you used was communication as a curriculum. Now, which in school. Now, the interesting part about this is this was not the run-of-the-mill communication, get my degree in communication, graduate and and work for a PR firm or something like that. You were talking about the conflict resolution and actually developing a curriculum around this and teaching this in school. Please unpack that for me.
absolutely. It's really hard to like, especially with the political climate, to like get people on board with stuff like that because people are very cautious about what you teach their children, of course, and rightfully
Right,
so. But this to me, again, is a basic life skill. To me, it is unbelievable that um, people are graduating high school or graduating, moving to the next grade at all. And we don't know how, like you said, to really talk to each other, like
mhm,
like in a healthy way. Like we have, our way that we speak at school, at work, at home. Of course, those dynamics change. But like I mentioned in that podcast you're talking about, it's so much easier to instill healthy habits early than try to unlearn unhealthy habits later. So
right,
if we took the time um, to explain emotional regulation and intelligence and what that looks like, and different ways to shift the conversation dynamics to not use accusatory language and how to actually talk about the issue itself, because that's one big thing, like you said, we don't know how to talk with each other because we're not even talking about the issue anymore. It instantly becomes a, I believe this, you believe that, so therefore we are not compatible, even though there's always middle ground. And
right.
so we can't even get to that point because we have no idea how to even start the conversation.
Sure. How much of that is driven by, say, just a climate, or should I say, a product of the times, right?
Mm,
We're more engaged with that device in our hand, right? That appendage that's stuck to our hand and
mhm,
tapping as opposed to speaking.
mhm.
How much of that plays a role into it, where those muscles just aren't developed?
That is the that's a interesting insight. So yes, normally when I'm talking about it, that's not the angle I'm taking, but that is a very important one to take because especially we'll say Gen X and higher,
Mm,
well even millennials. I mean, like our kids are getting older too, right? So like we're seeing teenagers and stuff who are growing up on this, and I remember like you used to just go play outside after school, or you used to just do things. And
yeah,
it is impossible to be in the same room with kids nowadays without them just wanting to be on their video game or their phone. It's just the way it is. And part of you has to adapt to that because all their friends are doing, everyone's doing it, but at the same
sure,
time, you want to preserve the human element of communication. So you have to redefine that, right?
right.
So I think that you bring a very valid point. I think that's a part of it. I think another part of it is also it's human nature to okay, so subconsciously I think when a lot of people talk about communication in general, they're usually thinking along the lines of saying the right thing, persuasion, debating, or proving their point.
Right.
So but in my experience most conflict doesn't escalate only because of what was said. It escalates because of the state people were in when they said it. So healthy
Okay.
communication starts long before the words. So it starts with like regulation. So when we're dysregulated, whether again it's bad habits, we're tired, we're defensive, we're overwhelmed, we're activated, our brains are not built for listening or nuance in those moments.
Hmm.
So they're built for protection. at that time. So the first skill in any conflict is not just better language, but again, it's that ability to pause long enough to regain the choice, which
Right.
then consequently creates the space for better language and genuine listening.
Love that.
Yeah, so the pause is not about avoidance. It's the space where reaction turns into intentional response. But again, that's not stuff we're taught, like that regulation thing, like I mentioned. That's why and even when I say in schools, it may not be curriculum per se, like in the classroom, even if it's after school program or you go to the Boys and Girls Club and do a workshop with kids,
Mm.
there just needs to be something that's helping them create those types of skills. Because if you think about how an adult can't regulate their emotions,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right. Right. Is there, do you, in your experience and all the work that you're doing, um, have you seen one aspect of it to be more difficult than the other? And what I mean by that is, so obviously the communication, when we say communication, it's a two-way street. I think the idea of that, when we say that is me talking, you talking. But when we think about the individual, do you think folks have a tougher time in speaking their mind or hearing or excuse me, not hearing, listening? Is it tougher to start to learn to listen or for them to be able
Ooh,
to speak?
I love that. Oh, I
Oh,
haven't really thought
thank
about that. Okay.
you.
Okay, hold on now. Okay. Both are challenging. My initial reaction is listening is harder because it's just one of those things where everyone thinks they're good at it, but they're just
Right,
not.
right. Yeah,
Most people are listening with the intent to respond. They're waiting for you to stop talking. Sometimes they don't even wait for you to stop talking, but they're just waiting for their interjection.
sure,
Or they're hearing you just enough to know what to say in rebuttal to what you're
sure.
saying. And
Right.
that's just kind of how most people are. But I will also say that I've very much noticed, and I'm like this at times too, especially when it's something I'm really passionate about. You ever have that time where like you know exactly what you want to say in your head, but you cannot get those words to make sense
Of
when you say
course.
them? And so what's happening is I learned this during mediation practice. You'll, okay, I'll sit down with a couple or I don't know, two people who have been fighting for, let's just say months, if not years, like over one thing, right?
Hmm.
It's rarely about that thing. It's all the unspoken stuff underneath it that
Really?
they just won't say. Like instead of just saying, I don't feel respected, or I don't, or you hurt my feelings when this happened, or this is a soft spot for me because when I was 10, my dad used to yell at me. Something, there's always these things that build
Interesting.
us to this moment that you're never going to say out loud, which is my job to help you realize that's what it's really about. Um, and that's what makes it hard for people to communicate, I think, with other people because either they're not processing enough internally to even know what the real issue is, or they just won't say it out of defensiveness because they don't want to seem weak or sensitive or something like that. So they just find everything else to make a big deal about, like, it becomes about
Yeah,
everything else except for the thing.
yeah. So, have you seen any of that run along gender lines at all? And I ask because, so I have sisters, female friends, and so they will have an issue with someone, another woman,
Mhm.
and can't necessarily articulate what it is. And they
Yeah.
haven't even spoken to the other person. Whenever I've had problems with someone, beef with someone, I always feel like everyone knows where they stand. No one ever sees me and goes, "Man, what's Kay? Why is Kay mad at me?" Kay's gonna let you know, puts it out there. But I feel like there's so many people around me like I can't stand her. But she doesn't even know you can't stand her. She just feels it. But she doesn't ask you when you don't tell her. But I feel like that happens more with women than it does men. And maybe I'm just a caveman, a Neanderthal, and so on. But is there any truth to what I'm saying?
I mean, I think I think it has the potential to happen across gender lines, of course, but I will say maybe just like in the nature of how women tend to communicate, there's a certain etiquette that I think sometimes they feel like they have to maintain
Okay.
publicly, especially publicly and socially,
Okay.
that maybe enables that sort of behavior. So I'll say that much because you're not about to get me canceled. Not today.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I'm gonna okay, we'll leave it there. But there's all these things I'm recalling. I'm like, no, leave that.
We'll talk after you
Yeah,
get
right.
caught.
Right. We'll leave that one alone. So I mentioned that I was going to touch on some of those best practices. So you meet with folks, they bring you in to work on this this conflict between them. What's the homework you give folks? So when we go back to their respective corners, right, and I'm by myself, hey, what are some of the exercises or things that Dr. Lowe told me to do to develop that muscle that I haven't used?
I love that. Okay. Well, the first thing is, again, mindset shifts. And so, what I try to get them to think about is moving from accusation to curiosity. So, instead
Oh,
of asking who's right or wrong, try asking yourself, what's making this feel so hostile? Or what am I missing here? And what is this person actually trying to say to me right now that's
mm,
clearly just not being received,
right,
That first question alone usually changes the tone of a conversation because it invites explanation instead of defense. Um, and I think that's the starting point again, because once we start with that accusatory language, you automatically put the other person on defense and they're going to shut down. We're just not going to get anywhere,
right,
regardless of who's actually at fault. I think that's more important is getting to that common ground, right? Um, and another thing I try to have them think about separately is what is the ideal outcome of this for you? Like, is this something that
mm,
actually even needs to be resolved versus is this something we could walk away from and just, hey, it is what it is? And we'll get into that
right,
more with the no contact. But like, it's
right,
just even deciding what is the best course of action. Is this something that's recurring and you don't see changing that's not worth putting your time and energy in any further? Is this someone you have to see every day so you have to just figure it out anyway? Like
right,
I think even kind of jumping to the extreme of a worst case scenario, what would you want the ideal outcome to look like? And if this
right,
person was not in your life, or if you never spoke to them again, and today was the last conversation, what would that mean for you? And I think
yeah.
once you get really clear on that, it's easier to decide how to move forward.
I love that, man, because until you said that, I didn't think about that, right? Like two people can decide on what the outcome can be or what they want it to be, and then work with you to help them arrive to that space, right?
Mm-hmm,
So it
mm-hmm,
doesn't, so immediately conflict resolution to me immediately conjures up a thought of kumbaya, running, holding hands and we're great and all of our problems are there. And it sounds like you suggested that it might just be some coexistence, right? Running parallel and just coexistence, which is, that's just interesting because it's not something I thought about. I would have
yeah.
thought that before you said it
Mm-hmm,
and brought this kind of crystallizing it. I don't know if I would
mm-hmm.
have viewed that as resolution. But
Resolution.
yeah,
Yeah, and again, maybe this is my nuanced definition of, now you make me, I want to like look up the traditional dictionary definition of it. But I think over time, what I've seen is that just the same way we say, like, you can love someone and let them go. Like, just because you separate, it doesn't mean it has to be a negative thing. It could be a very peaceful thing.
right,
Um, and sometimes that's what needs to happen for you to
sure,
both move on and have what you need in your lives. And so to be, especially internally resolved, I think that's what it looks like sometimes.
yeah. So are there times, or maybe during your study, you came across certain examples where this may just be a white flag moment. Just wave the white flag, give up and say, hey, there's no pathway back. Save your money. I'm not even going to take your money for you. I'm not going to charge you for this session. There's no pathway back. Or is there always a place to, oh, there's not always a place to land. Okay. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
So the funny thing is, when I first got certified as a mediator, I thought I was going to primarily be working with families and divorce people going through a
Sure.
divorce. I switched from that very quickly. That's
Interesting.
a post-traumatic for me. I come, from divorced parents when I was young, which is fine. But to relive that every day through other people is kind of a lot, and it gets very ugly. Um, briefly, I actually considered starting a mediation firm that focused on sort of not celebrating divorce. That sounds very negative. I mean, that's not what people want to hear. But I'm a firm believer, as a child of divorced parents, I knew from a very young age my parents don't need to be together. I wasn't the little
Right,
girl praying for them to work it out. I
right,
please go your separate ways.
right,
Um, and so I think against better judgment, sometimes it's just not going to work out. But because of whatever you tell yourself, whether it might be kids, it might be I put this many years in the relationship, whatever it is,
sure.
I'm financially dependent on this person, whatever it is, we have a million reasons to convince ourselves to stay. And what I found working specifically in those cases is I wish I can get them to celebrate their separation, knowing
Mhm.
like this is a new beginning for you. Go live your best life. You can love each other
Right,
from a distance. Keep loving your kids. Do all these things. Make your own money. Like it can be it doesn't have to be a sad thing. So I actually used to get kind of irritated when like someone would well, actually, no, it was one of my friends too. She told me she was getting divorced, and I said, "Congratulations." But like, it wasn't in a, I swear it wasn't like in a negative space. It was like,
all
I know what you've been going through.
right, okay,
Congratulations.
right,
Please. Like, so
right,
I wish there was, it's not to encourage divorce, obviously. We don't want that. But for some people, I think it is worth acknowledging that that is the better alternative for some people. And instead of dragging this out for another 10, 20 years, just because you think you have to, I, please go live your life.
right. Dr. Lowe said, celebrate divorce. Thank you for the hot take, by the way. I appreciate that. Oh, here, God, that's going
I knew I was
viral.
gonna say something. I was gonna say something wrong tonight. So that was I'm trying to let that be the only thing.
Yeah, that's I love that. So I'm gonna hit a little bit of a pivot,
Yeah.
kind of deviate. So all across, I guess the internet sphere,
Mm,
type up, and go inside the Google machine and type up no contact. There's
mm,
all of this footage. Recently, there was a show. Oprah Winfrey did a show, and she focused on this as a topic. This no contact,
I
and
did
so
see
I
her show. Yeah.
immediately, true story, I immediately thought of you and how this conflict resolution ties into, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe this has
Mhm,
nothing to whatsoever to do with it. I watched the episode, Oprah's episode, and um, I wasn't necessarily sure if there was even any conflict. Or
mm,
maybe the individuals didn't know whether or not they were conflicted, if
mm,
that makes sense, if that's the
mm.
same thing. Um, so I wanted to ask you, one, have you seen or heard this kind of growing phenomenon of this no contact amongst family? And does that contact resolution kind of tie into this?
Yeah, to make sure I am on the same page because I did not see Oprah's episode. I mean, what I've seen like on TikTok and
Hmm.
Instagram is a bit of people, especially cutting off their parents.
Yep.
Okay, I've seen a lot of that. Okay,
Yep.
then yes. And I would say yes, resolution does very much tie into this. So I
Okay.
think my take on it is actually going to be a little less about whether it's the way to go or not versus weighing out what it really means to do this. Because I think it could
Mm.
be a little impulsive sometimes to jump on a
Okay.
trend, and every time someone makes you mad, you just cut them off or ghost them. So
Right.
I think I just want to paint a clearer picture about the impact it could really have, especially
Sure.
from a resolution standpoint.
Right.
So I think first, to be clear, um, no contact is not the same is well, it's not just the absence of communication, right? So it's actually a very powerful communicative act, because we all know silence speaks volumes. So many people consider no contact in moments of pain. Um, and so after repeated disappointment, ongoing conflict, emotional exhaustion, in those moments, the nervous system is usually trying to do one thing, and that's find relief or through protection. And distance can absolutely help regulate overwhelming emotions. But regulation and resolution are not the same thing. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
regulation would ask, what do I need right now to calm down and feel safe? And resolution would ask, what decision can I live with over time without carrying ongoing internal conflict?
Right.
So those two questions don't always lead to the same answer. So one of the risks I see in this is making a permanent relational decision in a temporary emotional state. When we're overwhelmed, cutting someone off can feel like the fastest way to breathe again.
Sure.
And sometimes that distance is necessary, but it's worth pausing long enough to ask whether we need it's so it's worth pausing long enough to ask whether what we need is space or severance.
Hmm.
So there's a difference between saying, again, I need some time and distance to stabilize, and saying, I'm done, like forever. So
Right.
before choosing no contact, I just would encourage people to think beyond the present moment and ask what I would call like the future self questions. So that's thinking about, if nothing changes, how will I feel about this decision in 5 years?
Sure.
Or if something irreversible happened tomorrow, illness, death, uh, would I feel at peace with how I felt or how I left this? So figuring out, is your goal relief, safety, or closure? Um, and does no contact actually serve that goal?
Interesting. Got it.
Yeah. So it isn't about like fear or guilt per se. I think it's more about perspective. So just keeping in mind that some choices can't be revisited, and
Right.
resolution means being able to live with that reality without regret eating away at you later.
Right. Are we just also experiencing a time in our lives where people are just tapping out too soon? Like when I was growing up, professionally, especially more so, I was hearing this in those professional environments where they would say, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And so now it feels like, listen, everyone's trying to find their nirvana once they're chi centered. And if that energy, right, we're overusing that word, isn't right, I'm out. They're leaving.
Yeah.
And life is hard. I don't know if where folks maybe think that this is going to be easy and simple and that we should always feel good and we should always agree. When
Mhm.
that doesn't happen, we create distance, right? I don't want to deal with this one. I don't want to deal with that. I've been around folks, maybe you have as well, where folks, of a certain culture will say, well, listen, I ain't got time for this. Yeah, you do. You have time for this, right? I know you. You better stand online and wait. And you know what I mean? Wait for that service, wait for that job, wait for
Yeah.
that. But we want to know and kind of move. And so I'm just kind of wondering, I get, or I don't, but I understand what people are saying about this no contact.
Yeah.
And then kind of going to our respective corners on the lack of conflict resolution. But I wonder how much of this is just a sign of the times and
Mm.
just people, just as much as we are more knowledgeable with
Mhm.
access information, that we're at the same time just a lot weaker than we've ever been.
Mm.
I know I said a lot there, but
No, yeah, but it's okay, yeah, but all very good points. And I definitely understand that perspective. Um,
so I
so
said a lot. So let me say this. I'll go back to um, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Is that still a thing? And do you prescribe us to be that way now?
okay, so actually that's one of my models as well. However, it's not necessarily, when I use that, I'm using it in the context of like, this is what I love about traveling is you're exposed to other cultures and foods and things that you're not used to in your day to day, and that makes you very uncomfortable. So you kind of shut down, or you just stay in your resort, little things like that, but you don't really embrace what the differences happening
Sure.
around you. So that's kind of what
Yep.
I mean when I use it. For this context, I would say it's a little different. I think it's definitely interesting to bring up the generational gaps or differences.
Hmm.
I agree, but I will also say I ain't got time for that. I will also say, um, I will also say I also don't think it's something to glorify, to normalize toxic relationships either, just because you're related to someone, they've been in your life for so long. I don't believe that's healthy. I think, without saying it, a lot of people wouldn't even associate with certain family members if it wasn't for blood. So it's just like,
Hmm. Right.
So that obligation of feeling tied to someone or tolerating certain behaviors just because of whatever title or kin you have, I
Hmm.
don't necessarily agree with that. Um, and I will say older generations tend to be a lot more I don't want to say blind loyalty, but loyal to the family dynamic. You know, that's
Oh, I
just kind of
see.
that's
Okay.
traditionally that's how it's been. Like you family
Right.
above everything else, family and religion. Um, but the distinction for me becomes, and so also with the times, social media, everything else, new generation, they are a lot more, I would say, emotionally aware, not
Mm.
weak, I'll say emotionally aware
Right.
than
Okay.
previous generations. And they're really embracing that and leading with it in a way that makes, I think, older generations feel uncomfortable. Because
Okay.
again, we've had to just take the grit. It's just kind of like, if I said this, I got whooped, or, whatever it was. And now it's
Right.
like, well, now I got to sit down and explain to my child. Like, I think we're just, times are different. No, a lot of us don't want to admit it, but you get stuck in your ways. But I think it's also worth admitting a lot of our ways haven't been the healthiest and shouldn't have been that way in the first place. And that's okay as
Good point.
well. So, where the distinction comes for me is, are you making this decision between harm or discomfort? So, some relationships are genuinely unsafe, whether that's emotionally, psychologically, or physically. And in those cases, of course, no contact can be protective and appropriate because safety comes first. But other relationships are not unsafe, but they're painful, disappointing, triggering, or even just misaligned. Um, and those situations may call for boundaries or
Mm.
reduced contact or very structured interactions rather than total disappearance. So, not every hard relationship requires erasure. Some just require limits. And that's a very personal choice in deciding which case it is. Um, but these options at least keep the door intentionally closed rather than slammed shut, which
Right.
leaves room for future clarity even if full repair never happens, So it's also important to name something I think we don't talk about enough is even when no contact is the right choice, it often again comes with grief. So not just
Oh,
grief for the
interesting.
person, but grief for the relationship that you hoped for and didn't get. So that relief and grief can exist at the same time, and pretending otherwise usually delays the healing process. So
So
again,
yeah, that's a bit of a curveball for me because
okay.
I'm of the mindset that no contact
Mhm.
is essentially happening because it provides some relief, right? That it feels better, right?
Mhm.
And you're saying that there's that grief, right? So if it's burdensome, if it's heavy, if I'm
Mhm.
feeling this grief, if I'm suffering from separation anxieties or whatever accompanies that, then why am I doing it? Right?
Yeah,
Why am
yeah.
I not booking an appointment to go see Dr. Lowe so me and my mom or my brother or whomever it is
Mhm.
can find a pathway back? That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I guess what I mean by that is understanding that even when you're in a not like a toxic or a non-healthy relationship, there's still that sort of attachment you're going to have. Like just because you break some, like just say you break off with your abusive boyfriend, you notice a lot of victims are still attached to their abuser. Like
Sure.
there's this thing that happens, and you almost feel guilty for caring about this person, and when you know they've done all these things to you, just
Right.
how like if you grew up with the abusive father, like you find yourself still vying for their attention, or you still just want them in your lives, even though they're not
Right.
the best father
Okay.
figure. So I think it's like still under just being aware that you're probably still going to experience those things even after you cut them off because you still longed for this relationship that you wanted and it didn't work out. So it's nothing negative that I think it's less heavy than the grief while you're in the relationship, but it's just worth noting that proceed with caution and just know that's normal to still grieve that relationship for what it was or wasn't, you know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, that provides some clarity. I've got one other question, but before I get to my final question, I've often wondered with folks like you, Dr. Lowe, that have what I would describe this superpower, right? How does this affect your own relationships? Does this make you more tolerant,
Mhm.
bigger than? They don't know. They don't understand. or or you shorter as a result of it, right? Less
Mm,
tolerant, right? As I said before, I ain't got time for this, right?
exactly.
Or where does it put you at?
That is a great question. Um, I think it depends. I think that I'm generally very compassionate. So I'm very much more compassionate with other people than myself. Like
Mm.
I will talk you through this all day and be like, well, you just made a mistake. Don't beat yourself up. But if I make a mistake, I'm gonna be beating myself up until next week. So like
Um,
that's something I am consciously working on all the time. I
okay.
find it just easier. I'm learning how to be as compassionate with myself as I am with others, and understanding. But I definitely ain't got time for love stuff. I just, I think it's such an interesting thing. I don't know if I've really thought about it this way, but as outwardly compassionate as I am, internally though, I'm thinking to myself,
Mm,
come on, man. Like, come on.
really?
And I
Really?
have to admit, it's always a little different when it's your own personal situations. When you're managing your own family dynamics, your own friendships, you can tell somebody else, like if someone else was telling me this about theirs, I would tell them to, okay, yeah, maybe cut them off or maybe have
Right.
some distance. But then do I find myself cutting off every single person who I probably should? It takes a little longer. Have I done it? Absolutely.
Right.
Is it easy? Never.
Right.
But one thing I am very transparent about, and this is actually even why I started my own consultancy, is because I'm not interested in trying to portray some performance of perfectionism.
Mm,
I myself am learning with you all the time. Yes, I've studied some stuff and I have some lived experiences, and I think I have a pretty grounded way of applying theoretical frameworks to realities. Maybe a little more than I guess an average person would, and I can think people through things. I think I give
right.
people the ability to take a step back and just think it through versus emotionally
Interesting.
reacting. But very much so. I learned so much through people I work with, like literally,
Interesting.
like out seriously, like whether it's just a mirror to myself of something that I didn't realize, I'm like, dang, would I have said that or would I, like it's
Right.
just
Right.
it makes me take a step back and just make sure, again, not about perfection, but I also want to be the kind of person who does practice what I preach, and so I have to take a step back. Sometimes I do the same homework I give other people,
Right.
just to stay, aligned with myself
I
and
love that.
what I'm trying to give people. So I it's very contextual, but I think I can work more on my own self-compassion
Sure.
and self-patience, but I think generally speaking, I'm pretty good with dealing with others.
Got it. Love that. So Ryan, for me, just and real simple softball. And where do you see the greater dynamic with respect to relationships, where there's conflict resolution or the principles in and of around conflict resolution? Is it in this kind of work corporate environment? Is it in this family dynamic? And if so, is it spouse? Is it, siblings? Where do you see the greatest concentration for the need for conflict resolution based off your own personal experiences?
Life, I would say, but
All the
it's
above, right?
well. So I mean, that's actually a really great point that I want to highlight. Is I primarily do the work with organizations, so it's like about the workplace dynamic. However, I always make it clear these are transferable skills. Communication skills work
Hmm.
everywhere. I've had so many people tell me like, "Oh yeah, that thing you said about active listening, I tried that with my wife tonight, and it went over pretty well." Like it's just like it's if you try these things, and this is one thing I want to clarify too, because I had somebody ask me this. When you're doing a workshop or doing whatever kind of training, I don't want you to feel like these are tools where it's like, oh, I'm in this situation like a robot, and now I have to apply my active listening, and I have to. That's not how it works.
Okay,
We're just people. Like this is why again I want to instill these skills in younger people because they'll grow up
sure,
doing it naturally instead of
sure,
trying to process it like a robot.
right,
um, these are just basic ways to make your conversations a little easier. So if you just think about like I just really try to humanize everything. Like even at work and stuff, everybody has like their hat on no matter where they are in their space, and it's all about. Of course, we're going to be professional here, more casual here. I get that we wear
Mhm.
different hats, but across all of it, I think when we're being genuine and wanting to just build understanding between each other,
Hmm.
That's where we start. Like it's just simple. Like it doesn't have to be a whole thing, like let's
Right,
just show up and I just genuinely want to know, okay, like what are you thinking? Like what are you feeling? Like I just want to understand where you're coming from. I don't have to agree with it, but
right,
I'm also not going to sit here and try to convince you or persuade you of anything. I'm going to present my side and hopefully I say something that sticks with you. Um, and there's an exchange there of us receiving insights that we didn't have before that makes this whole
right,
thing clearer. But that's the problem again, is like no, it's just communication has turned into this weird, almost alien-like thing that we do where it's like we don't know how to connect with people. Just just be a human being and be concerned. Like just aren't you curious?
love that. I absolutely love that. Dr. Lowe, as I said, I was so looking forward to carving out some time to talk with you, and you absolutely did not disappoint. No buyer's
Oh,
remorse here. Thank you so much for
thank you.
stopping by the J&K show. You are always welcome. Yeah. Whenever you want to come
Yeah.
back, please certainly make sure that you do. I think you with all of your knowledge and the gems that you drop for our listeners, we certainly do appreciate it. For those of you listening and watching, thank you, appreciate it for checking in with the J&K show. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for watching the J&K Show.